Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Asplin, and I am the Executive Director of the National Criminal Justice Association. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to our webinar on state and local partnerships for criminal justice reform. This is part of a series of webinars by the NCJA and sponsored by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. These webinars highlight the need for planning and collaboration between states and locals. Before we begin, let me cover some quick logistical items. First, we will be recording today's session for future playback. The recording and the slides of the session will be posted on the NCJA website and emailed to everyone who registered for this session. Today is being audio cast through the speakers on your computer. If you do not have speakers or would prefer to call in using your phone, please use the number contained in your registration email or on the Event Info tab located on the top left-hand side of the screen. If you have issues with the audio during the webinar, please feel free to use the phone. Now, due to the number of people joining us today, we have muted participants to reduce the background noise. If you have questions for the presenters, we encourage you to submit them using the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. We've included time for a question and answer period at the end of the presentation, so if your question doesn't get answered as part of the main presentation, we will try to answer it then. However, you may submit your question at any time. Also, if you would like to communicate with NCJA staff during the webinar, please submit your comment using the chat feature to host. If you have technical difficulties or get disconnected during the session, you can reconnect to the session using the same link that you used to join the session initially. Now, in the last 5 minutes of the question and answer period, we will ask you to complete a short survey. Information you provide will help us to plan and improve. To briefly introduce our speakers for today's section, first is Carlton Moore. Carlton has served as the Executive Director of the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services, which is the Ohio SAA, since 2005. In this role, he is responsible for the administration and evaluation of state and federal grants for law enforcement, victim assistance, juvenile justice, crime prevention courts, anti-trafficking efforts, reentry, corrections programs, and traffic safety. He also works in continuing partnership with law enforcement task forces and provides the governor and the director of the Department of Public Safety with current and projected criminal justice strategies. Next will be Mike Daniels. He is policy coordinator for Franklin County, Ohio. In this role, county-wide policy role, Michael coordinates with the key county justice entities, including the courts, sheriff's office, prosecutor, public defender, as well as other community groups and agencies, providing assistance and guidance in the implementation of evidence-based practices in criminal justice that promote public safety and offender success. He serves as the representative of the Board of Commissioners on all county reentry and justice policy programs and committees. He coordinates the county's participation at the National Institute of Corrections Center of Innovation and is responsible for federal and state grants for justice programming. He serves as the staff liaison and coordinator of the Criminal Justice Planning Board and guides the board in developing a strategic direction to inform planning and recommendations to improve the criminal justice system. Our final speaker is Holly Matthews. Holly is the Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council in Lucas County, Ohio. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, the CJCC, is a unit of local government that provides an integrated criminal justice information system, criminal history record checks, and management of federal grant dollars to Lucas County and Northwest Ohio. Welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. And Carlton, I will now turn the presentation over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I certainly hope my phone sounds better than yours. Good afternoon. My name is Carlton Moore, and I am the Executive Director of the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services. I also serve as the President of the National Criminal Justice Association Board of Directors. I want to start my short presentation. By telling you a little bit about the Office of Criminal Justice Services. I have been privileged to serve as the Executive Director since 2005. Our team here is a diverse group of highly motivated, highly skilled criminal justice professionals who are dedicated to our mission to serve as the lead criminal justice planning agency for the state of Ohio. Here's our vision statement. I want to point out that this vision statement was developed by the staff. We held a staff retreat several years ago, and this is what they collectively decided. The statement represents both what we do on a daily basis and what we hope is the impact of our work. The Office of Criminal Justice Services is the state administering agency for federal criminal justice funds. Each state and territory's governor designates an entity to administer federal criminal justice funds. You can see the list of grants we administer. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with many of the federal grants listed here. I will talk more about the Justice Assistance Grant and the Violence Against Women Act grant a little later when I discuss collaboration with the CJCCs. But the one federal grant that is a little different is the Project Safe Neighborhood Grant. This grant is actually awarded to the U.S. Attorney's offices. They contract with OCJS to administer this grant on their behalf. We also administer a few state grants. Here's the breakdown of the sections in our office. I think people are always surprised when they notice two of our sections, driver training and Motorcycle Ohio. When the new administration came in back in 2011, they asked if I would take over these sections as well. There are actually best practices in these disciplines also, and we have gone through major changes in our curriculum in both of these areas. So here's what you all want to talk about today. How do we work together? We collaborate together in a number of ways, both formally and informally. The reality is that no matter how good our relationships are around the state, the people who live and work in a particular community are always going to know more about it. They can help you with contacts you may need to achieve a strategic goal, make you aware of local issues that have not yet bubbled up to the state level, provide you with updates on the progress of programs, or sometimes the lack of progress, before we have a chance to conduct either financial or programmatic monitoring. They also help with grant recommendations. When we release a request for proposal for the Justice Assistance Grant, or the JAG grant, our application review process consists of external peer reviewers, internal compliance review, internal subject matter experts, and senior level staff review of recommendations. In the CJCC counties, they act as the external peer reviewers as long as they have a strategic plan in place. This process allows us to benefit from their intricate personal knowledge of the specific needs of their communities and their understanding of the comprehensive criminal justice picture. Unlike a peer reviewer who sees each application they review in a vacuum, CJCCs are able to look at each application and make a determination both on its individual merit and on how it advances the county's efforts to achieve its strategic goals. In the case of grants administration, the CJCs actually administer the Violence Against Women Act grants in their communities, acting in many ways as a mini OCJS in their jurisdiction. We also work together on program implementation. At OCJS, we have a number of programs that we have implemented around the state. One such program is the Ohio Community Initiative to Reduce Violence, or OSERV. The OSERV initiative is a focused deterrent strategy to reduce group and gang-related homicides. The initiative is based on the ceasefire initiative that took place in Boston in the 90s. When it was implemented in Toledo, Ohio, the CJCC was an important partner in the effort, from the initial discussions with partners to program development and finally implementation. Perhaps the most important thing we do together is solve problems. And over the years, we have dealt with some very difficult issues. One of the most pressing issues took place right here in Columbus, Ohio, when we became aware of the unacceptable lack of services that one of our shelters was providing to victims of domestic violence. We put a team together to determine if the reports and concerns we were hearing were accurate. Once the reports were confirmed, the Office of Criminal Justice Services, the CJCC, the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, other partners, along with the philanthropic community here in Columbus, developed a plan to fix this situation. Collectively, we were able to get a new organization to take over management of the shelter. A new shelter board was put in place, and money that had stopped flowing to the shelter from foundations and other funders began to flow. This was, as I mentioned, a difficult situation, and I am sure that there are some people who still have hard feelings about this. But what was important to all of us were the services that our victims were entitled to have in the most difficult time in their lives. This could not have happened if not for the relationship between the CJCC and the Office of Criminal Justice Services. Finally, let me touch a bit on information sharing. I know Holly will talk a bit about NORIS, or the Northwest Ohio Regional Information System, during her presentation. But here at OCJS, we host the Criminal Justice Information Systems Board and work closely with NORIS. One project that we are working on with them is based on our work focused on community police relations. The FBI's new use of force report that agencies across the country will be able to utilize. OCJS will be the state entity here in Ohio responsible for submitting this data to the FBI. NORIS is one partner who we are working with to ensure that agencies who want to submit this data are able to do so through the use of their records management systems. I also want to touch on something that our next presenter, Michael Daniels, will talk a little bit about, and that is the Stepping Up Initiative. And here at OCJS, we have been big supporters of the Stepping Up Initiative. In fact, I will be meeting with Michael in the coming days to talk about the progress that Franklin County has made in their Stepping Up Initiative. I look forward to finding ways we can work together to encourage other counties to take on this effort and to be more supportive of Franklin County's efforts. Here's my contact information, and please feel free to contact me if you should have any questions or comments that aren't addressed during this presentation. And now let me introduce our next presenter, Michael Daniels, Justice Policy Coordinator, Franklin County, Ohio, Office of Justice Policy and Programs. Michael?
Carlton, thank you very much. And as Carlton said, I really appreciate the partnership that we have here in Franklin County with OCJS, being able to be the boots on the ground as the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee, or we call it the Criminal Justice Planning Board, and then being able to bounce ideas off of Carlton and get that broader, more statewide perspective. We very much appreciate the partnership that we have. I do want to talk a little bit about the Stepping Up Initiative. For those of you, hopefully no one is hearing about this for the first time. But Stepping Up is a national initiative. It's a partnership between the National Association of Counties, the Council of State Governments Justice Center, and the National Psychiatric Association Foundation, whose goal is to reduce the number of individuals with mental health issues who are currently incarcerated both in prisons and in jails. And we're going to focus, because this is a county level presentation, we're going to focus this at the jail level. there are 4 key measures within the Stepping Up initiative which we are always keeping in mind. One is, how do we reduce the number of people with mental health issues who are booked into jail in the first place? How do we shorten the average length of stay for folks who have mental health issues in the jails? The truth is that, folks, if you have a mental health condition, you are more likely to be booked into jail more often, and you are more likely to stay longer, regardless of the charge level or risk level, simply from a standpoint of lack of resources. In Franklin County, for instance, the average length of stay for a person without a mental health issue in our jails is 20 days. The average length of stay for someone with a mental health issue is 32 days. And so that disparity is 60% longer for folks who have mental health conditions. The third thing is to increase the percentage of connection to care for people who have mental health issues while they are in jail, that we're not waiting until after they're released and giving them a brochure on exit and saying, gosh, we hope that you follow up, we hope that you get connected to services when you get out, but actually trying to make those connections and to not think as much about discharge planning for these folks who are in our jail as to think about what transition planning looks like so that they transition from jail out into the community and aren't just discharged and sort of booted out to the street. And the fourth thing is to lower the rate of recidivism for folks with mental health conditions. We'd like to do this certainly for everyone, but simply to stop the revolving door of folks who come through the jail, are released to the street, go to the shelter, to the emergency room, to the street, back to the jail. So those are the 4 main goals. We do this by looking across the spectrum of what would normally be considered a sequential intercept model. Most of this shouldn't be new to many of you, but looking across various intercept points, including law enforcement, initial detention or initial arraignment, what happens in jail and in court, what happens at reentry, what happens at community corrections. This is the board that we have put together to look across this entire spectrum from pre-arrest diversion all the way through incarceration reentry. And look at the Criminal Justice Planning Board. This is our CJPP. This is our Criminal Justice Planning Council, Coordinating Council, made up of a member of the Board of Commissioners, the mayor from the City of Columbus and the City of Whitehall, members from the Columbus City Council. I won't read all of the members to you here. But what I think is important to realize is that we have both the county level and the city municipal level represented. We have law enforcement represented. We have both the prosecutor as well as the defense bench, all different levels of the court, all different levels of probation, and then all of the community partners who provide community-based correctional facility, halfway house services, jobs, etc. We've also included the Board of Developmental Disabilities with this. We do realize that as we begin to dig into this issue and discover folks who have mental health conditions in the jails, some of them are diagnosable as mental illnesses, severe and persistent or otherwise. Some of them are indeed developmental disabilities and perhaps even traumatic brain injury. And so we believe that having someone from the Board of Developmental Disabilities at the table is extremely important to represent the interests of those clients as well. So what are the types of things that we're doing here in Franklin County? We believe that the best way to keep people with mental illnesses out of the jail is to not arrest them in the first place. And so to that end, we're implementing even more crisis intervention training and crisis intervention type training, if you will, mental health first aid and others, for patrol officers, dispatchers, and first responders. Increasing crisis services and capacity, as well as reaching out to the community to try to do some education and to help them understand that law enforcement does not always have to be involved when someone is in crisis. If we can teach members of families and members of communities how to recognize the symptoms of the folks that they're around and how to make connections to care that don't involve calling the police. Remember that mental health issues are one of the only ones, if you have a heart attack, everyone will call the ambulance. If you have a mental health breakdown, almost certainly everyone will call the police officer. And so why we're calling police in situation for one medical condition and an ambulance for another, we're really trying to get to that point where people can recognize what these issues are and make the correct call and make the correct level of diversion. What kind of data are we collecting? How many arrests are being made for nonviolent crimes? How many of those are folks with mental illness? What alternatives exist for family and friends of folks? And who needs to be at the table? Law enforcement, the local mental health board, the prosecutor, and municipalities. Maybe there are ordinance changes. There are options for cite and release. There are options that don't involve actually taking someone to jail that can be implemented. And so we've looked at a variety of these whole types of issues, and we've outlined a great many goals and mechanisms for getting to those goals. And at the end of this, anyone who would like to see our 4-year plan with all of our goals in it and our current tracking website, I'd be happy to share that information. What happens if someone does have to go to jail? Well, before they get arraigned, before they go to trial, we believe in doing brief mental health screening and risk assessment on as many people as possible. We do brief mental health screens on every person who is booked into the jail, risk assessments on folks who are eligible for some of our programming, including low risk nonviolent misdemeanants, looking for alternatives to incarceration for those folks, putting mental health board representatives and job and family services representatives at the court level to be able to make connections while the arraignment judge is there, who can then say, I will release you on your recognizance, Mr. Smith, but only after I've convinced that you have gone over and made the appropriate connection to Medicaid so that you can go ahead and get the care that you need. And enhanced use and efficiency of specialty dockets in Franklin County. We do a very good job of this. We have a drug court, we have a mental health court, we have a veterans court, we have a solicitation court, and we're looking at what some of the other options might be as we move forward. The data that we're collecting here, how many detainees are being screened for mental health, how many pretrial offenders are in the jail, remembering that in Franklin County, 60% of the folks sitting in the jail have yet to be convicted of the crime for which they are currently incarcerated. How many pretrial offenders have mental illness? What's the average time of stay? And who needs to be there? Obviously, law enforcement, the folks who are taking care of the jail, the arraignment court, the mental health board, and then all of the folks who are representing both the interests of the state as well as the interests of the defendant. For those folks who where incarceration is the appropriate option, and for some folks that is the appropriate option, what are the needs and assessments of special housing populations that we can put in place? Can we put recovery housing pods in the jail? Can we put honor dorms? Can we put veterans pods? Can we put programming in place for women who have specific issues? What are we doing? We are training at least 50% of our corrections deputies in crisis intervention training for corrections. We took the curriculum for crisis intervention training for patrol, tweaked it for the specific issues that are involved in an incarcerated setting, have trained 50% of our deputies in CIT. We have seen use of force incidents drop precipitously. We've seen inmate-on-inmate violence and inmate-on-staff violence drop precipitously. Keep-away orders and disciplinary actions have fallen. We believe that this is a program to help the deputies understand what their clients are going through and to see them in a different light. Comprehensive medical care and continuity of formulary. We can't talk about how important it is that someone who was taking a particular type of mental health medication before arrest is able to maintain that same formulation of medication after they get arrested. Very small changes in formulary can make very large changes in behavior and recovery. So we wanted to make sure that we had comprehensive care with a continuum of formulary and re-entry planning with post-release connection to resources. What happens when folks are transitioned out of jail and how are they connected to the community? So data we're collecting here, how many inmates are receiving programming for identified mental health issues, how many inmates have a transition plan that includes connection to care, and who's at the table? Again, law enforcement, the ADAM board, all the folks who are providing those kinds of services. In probation, we want 100% of our probation officers trained in some sort of mental health first aid so that they understand, again, what the special needs of their clients with mental health issues might be. We have embedded job and family services folks in the probation department so that 2 days a week, probationers can go directly from seeing their probation officer literally down the hallway, sit down with someone who can sign them up for Affordable Care Act, expanded Medicaid benefits, get them connected to food stamps, get them connected to child care, et cetera, whatever the issues are that they might be eligible for. Having reentry specialists and ongoing reentry coalition activities so that we're reaching into the jails to meet folks before they get out and making sure that they know where to come upon release to continue to get services. And again, looking at those special housing units. What are we doing? Are we doing veterans pods? Are we doing honor dorms? Are we doing those sorts of things? So the type of data, of course, here that we're collecting, how many folks are connected, what is the overall return to jail rate, what is the return to jail rate for those with mental health issues, and again, who's at the table, probation, the reentry coalition, the mental health board. And we included here the business community. We believe that it's very important for members of the business community, members of the community who are landlords or who are manage rental units, as well as faith-based and community-based organizations, to all be at this table so that we can begin to make connections to folks pre-release so that the business community understands here is a workforce, they are getting out, they have some special barriers, but they're also really looking for a chance to make a difference and to get out of the revolving door. So I've presented a lot of information about what we're doing in Franklin County in a relatively short period of time. Having said that, I'm happy to continue the conversation with anyone who would like to do so and to share any of the documentation, strategies, tracking, et cetera, that we are doing here in Franklin County. So I appreciate your attention, and with that, I'd like to recognize Holly Matthews, one of my colleagues who works up in the Toledo area, who will describe some of the amazing things they're doing with data-driven justice and other initiatives. Holly?
Thank you, Michael. I too want to express my appreciation for the support from the Office of Criminal Justice Services and specifically Carlton. Up here in Lucas County, we couldn't be accomplishing some of the initiatives that we're doing right now without their support. I know Carlton referenced the OIBR's use of force enhancement to our records management system for law enforcement, and that project wouldn't be moving forward as quickly without their financial support. So thank you, Carlton. All right, I am Holly Matthews, Executive Director of the Toledo-Lucas County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. I have a lot of information for everyone today. Thank you for joining us on this December day. I'm just going to start real basically. What is the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council? In Lucas County, we are actually a regional council of government established under the Ohio Revised Code, and we are also established as a Metropolitan County Criminal Justice Services agency, also under the Ohio Revised Code. We like to call ourselves a special purpose unit of local government. One thing of note, and this is something I always like to add about Lucas County, we're a smaller jurisdiction. Our county population is approximately 432,000. We're located in Northwest Ohio, right along the border of Michigan, and also along Lake Erie. The city of Toledo is our largest city. The city's population is 278,000. So one thing we like to say here in Lucas County is that we're really a right-sized jurisdiction to try innovative things while still facing many challenges of our much larger cities. And the other thing I would like to mention is that the Toledo-Lucas County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council was established in 1974. The CJCC is actually a 13-member board. We have 6 appointments from the City of Toledo. We have 6 appointments from Lucas County. We also have 1 at-large appointment by the CJCC, which is a suburban police chief representative. And this is really essential to our ongoing data initiatives through North. Valley Bowman English, the elected Toledo Municipal Clerk of Court, is the chair of the CJCC. Our mission statement. The mission of the CJCC is to promote and foster cooperation and coordination between separate governmental units and agencies, and to improve the criminal justice system through planning, analysis, technical assistance, training, information management, and such other services as requested by the governmental units that are served. As Carlton mentioned in his introduction, the CJCC serves as a regional planning unit for the Office of Criminal Justice Services and the Ohio Department of Youth Services. Both are state administrative agencies here in Ohio. As an RPU, we administer Violence Against Women Act and Title II funds for Lucas County. Additionally, CJCC is the recipient of the Lucas County Disparate JAG allocation. As a recipient of the JAG allocation, we work with both the city and the county on appropriate allocations of those funds. Our funding recommendations are made by the Allocation Review Committee. The Allocation Review Committee is a subcommittee of the full CJCC. The Allocation Review Committee reviews submitted grant applications, makes funding recommendations to the CJCC and ultimately OCJS as well. And our committee also serves as oversight for funded agencies. One topic that I thought would really fit well with Michael's presentation is our ongoing mental health initiatives in Lucas County. So as you can see on the screen is a list of the numerous national and state initiatives that we're participating in. Some to note: Data-Driven Justice, Safety and Justice Challenge. We have a Behavioral Health Criminal Justice Alternatives Committee. We also have completed the sequential intercept mapping process. We have recently hired a behavioral health criminal justice coordinator. We have a small behavioral health working group that's been convened through the Commissioner's Office. And we also have the Northwest Ohio Regional Information System sharing of behavioral health related tasks. So first off, I'd like to highlight our work through the Data-Driven Justice Initiative. The Data-Driven Justice Initiative focuses on cross-system information sharing. The Data-Driven Justice Initiative was started under the Obama administration and has recently transitioned to the Arnold Foundation with support from the National Association of Counties. As part of the Data-Driven Justice Initiative, a team from Lucas County attended the Data-Driven Justice Behavioral Health Design Institute, where we developed an action plan for cross-system information sharing for high utilizers. I believe Franklin County was in attendance as well. Upon our return, we have developed a list of high utilizers between systems. We are working on convening a team to review that list, and as my team members say, we are going to start working those cases and see what we can do to connect those individuals to needed services and hopefully break the cycle of incarceration for that person. Another really recent focus has been an initiative to reduce, if not end, chronic homelessness in Lucas County. Just last week, the Toledo-Lucas County Homelessness Board convened a homelessness summit where we discussed the Housing First model. We had Mr. Mappy in from Milwaukee providing guidance and assistance with starting this process here in Lucas County. Core team has been formed to develop a plan for ending chronic homelessness in Lucas County. As we all know, homelessness and criminal justice issues often go hand in hand, so we're really looking forward to begin that process. Next major initiative in Lucas County is the Safety and Justice Challenge. Lucas County was selected as a MacArthur Foundation's Safety and Justice Challenge implementation site in 2016. We have received $1.75 million investment with the goal of reducing our local jail population by 15 to 18%, and that population is both pre-sentence and post-sentence. This initiative is being led by the Lucas County Board of Commissioners under the leadership of Commissioner Carol Contrada. Our current reforms have culminated in a 16% reduction in local jail population as of November 2017. That is pretty impressive work in less than 2 years. We're very excited about our progress, and we are really looking forward to further reforms to achieve an even greater reduction as we move forward. The CJCC has been involved in the core planning team since the planning grant phase of the project, which began in 2015, and is also responsible for coordinating the data collection from all system partners. This slide really highlights our 5 strategies of the Safety and Justice Challenge. I've provided a lot of information on this slide, and I just really want to go through some highlights of the work that has been done. So our strategies consist of pre-arrest deflection, managing based on risk, population review team, diversion of underserved populations, and coordinated probation practices. A few of the highlights from our implementation of these strategies include the diversion and deflection programs. With this, we are working with the Center for Court Innovation to create an innovative curriculum grounded in elements of procedural justice for targeted offenses. The offenses are drug possession, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. These 3 charges were selected specifically for their high level of racial disparity. And also the procedural justice underpinnings of this program really complements our ongoing procedural justice training for law enforcement and court actors. All law enforcement agencies in Lucas County have been trained in procedural justice at this point. The curriculum will be about 4 hours, and it will be eligible for repeat offenders either at a pre-arrest stage or at arraignment. The second strategy is managing based on risk. This strategy really builds upon our implementation of the Public Safety Assessment Court tool and evidence-based pretrial risk assessment. And with the tool, so far, our failure to appear rates have been reduced by 31%. Our new criminal activity has been reduced by 50%, and a new violent criminal activity has been reduced by 44%. One of the key features of this strategy is increasing the number of electronic monitoring units available to judges to further reduce our local jail population. The third strategy is really our low-tech approach to jail reduction. It's called the Population Review Team. We meet once a week, actually our meeting was today, to review the pretrial population in Lucas County. During the meeting, oftentimes a public defender and city prosecutor will discuss possible plea deals for individuals. If the plea deal is agreed upon, the public defender then follows up with the defendant who is being held in our pretrial jail. If the defendant agrees to the offer, a bring-back order is issued for Toledo Municipal Court, oftentimes the next day. If the judge accepts the plea, the case is resolved, and we often save 2, 4, 6, 40 days through this expedited case resolution process. The population review team was convened in February of 2016, and to date we have saved over 3,000 bed days. And our final strategy is Strategy 5, Coordinated Probation Practices. Strategy 5's goal is to really better utilize evidence-based practices for all 5 probation departments in Lucas County. We're also looking at coordinating services to better serve probationers. One noteworthy accomplishment so far has been the sharing of probationer drug testing results. In the past, each probation department only received the results for their probationers. However, it was realized that oftentimes probationers are subjected to more than one drug test based on which jurisdiction they're under probation for. Also, as part of the Safety and Justice Challenge, we are focusing on reducing racial and ethnic disparities. As the chart illustrates on the screen, there are disparities in the Lucas County criminal justice system. Specifically to target these disparities, the deflection and diversion curriculum targeting the 3 offenses I mentioned earlier is working to reduce the level of disparities. As part of this process, we are receiving technical assistance through the Burns Institute. Behavioral health is another component of the challenge. Just a quick summary of individuals with behavioral health needs in our system. 57% of individuals released from the Lucas County Jail have identified behavioral health issues. 67% of inmates have received behavioral health services at some point in their lives. 48% have been provided services within the last 5 years, and 17% have received services within the last 6 months. To further enhance our work, we are receiving technical assistance through Policy Research Incorporated. And then finally, community engagement is really the third thread issue in our challenge activities. One thing to note is the ongoing work of Toledo Police Chief George Krall. He has convened a Chiefs Advisory Board to discuss police-community relations within the city. The board hosts quarterly town hall meetings to discuss police-community relations and releases an annual report on the work that is being done. And then as we are talking about collaborations with OCJS, as part of their Community Collaborations Grant Program, OCJS has funded a police community relations survey in Toledo, and the analysis of that survey has just been released. All right, next section is the intersection of behavioral health and criminal justice. As I mentioned, well, Lucas County has numerous committees dedicated to this issue at this point. One of those committees is the Behavioral Health Criminal Justice Alternatives Committee, which was created to implement the SIM recommendations, which is the sequential intercept mapping model. Areas of focus for this committee include information sharing, transportation, 911 screening, access to services, and family support and alternative residential options. One thing I like to note in our work on behavioral health issues is that we have had some lessons learned as we have moved forward. So kind of our first takeaway so far has been that the Gain Short Screener was not the right fit for Lucas County. Upon implementation, it was quickly realized that with such a high level of individuals being assessed to need further assessments, that we need to find a better option to better help individuals that are in our jails. Another kind of takeaway has been that when trying to share information on behavioral health to the criminal justice community, there's always the concern of HIPAA. One such stumbling block was when we were trying to share the information of individuals that we identified as forensic linkage project individuals, that when we shared that with law enforcement, it was deemed that that information was not HIPAA compliant, so we need to find a better mechanism to share this information. And then also as part of this work group, we created a family resource fair for individuals with mental illness and their families. However, we had pretty low attendance, and we restructured that event in many ways, but we need to find a better way to reach out to the families of these individuals. And then one win has been the universal release of information. We have copies of each agency's release of information form on the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board website that's easily accessible, and we're currently working on a single release of information form. Here's just a quick picture of our sequential intercept map. And then the next topic is really the hiring of a behavioral health criminal justice coordinator. As I sort of give an overview of all the meetings and all the different groups that we have discussing this issue, it became very apparent that we actually need a staff person dedicated to doing the work. So in November of 2017, the CJCC has hired a behavioral health criminal justice coordinator that is funded through the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. The coordinator will be focusing on the intersection of behavioral health and criminal justice. The work of the coordinator will be guided by the CJCC Behavioral Health Criminal Justice Committee and will provide staff support to ongoing initiatives, including data-driven justice, stepping up, and the alternatives committee. I really believe that this dedicated position will be integral to moving the behavioral health and criminal justice initiative forward. In addition to all of our other national initiatives, Lucas County has recently, I believe last year, committed to the Stepping Up initiative, and we also have a behavioral health working group that was convened by Commissioner Tina Skeldon-Wozniak. The work group has really been pretty singularly focused, and the focus is discussions on what a deflection center in Lucas County looks like, how will we fund a deflection center, and what services need to be in a deflection center. And that work is ongoing. And then finally, I want to give a quick overview of the Northwest Ohio Regional Information System. Lucas County has a robust information sharing infrastructure. The Northwest Ohio Regional Information Sharing Network, which is known as NORIS. NORIS was founded in 1974 and currently serves 134 criminal justice agencies. NORIS has 33 employees who are responsible for developing and maintaining court, law enforcement, and jail records management systems. Additionally, we have a network staff and 24/7 help desk. NORIS has over 100 million criminal justice records in its database. The functions of NORIS. NORIS develops and maintains technology solutions for law enforcement, courts, probations, and corrections. In the development and enhancement of NORIS applications, staff focus on managing and improving data quality, increased data sharing and data integration capacity, identity management, and cross-system agency workflow. NORIS links law enforcement, courts, probation, corrections, and related criminal justice applications through the use of a regional identifier, allowing information sharing among agencies and the automation of routine processes. This also enables us to track an offender throughout the system. This functionality has been essential in the Safety and Justice Challenge and looking at our outcomes. Next up is just an overview of some of our ongoing behavioral health related projects. NORIS is currently rewriting the drug testing billing software and developing data dashboards for the Safety and Justice Challenge. Additionally, NORIS is developing probation queries. This will allow probation departments to have access to needed information. One such example is the urinalysis results that was made possible through the Safety and Justice Challenge. Also, additional information sharing is being discussed and solutions will be developed to share the needed information. Here I have an example of one of our existing dashboards. This dashboard is the electronic monitoring use dashboard, which shows real-time electronic monitoring capacity. The next dashboard is the frequent utilizer dashboard. This dashboard provides a summary of individuals with numerous bookings assigned to their RID. You can see from this dashboard that currently our highest utilizer of the Lucas County Corrections Center has 20 bookings in 24 months. As with the electronic monitoring dashboard, this is real-time information and can be manipulated by the users. We hope to expand this dashboard with additional information as it becomes available. And finally, I want to touch upon the law enforcement components of NORIS. The Sheriff Tharp has created the drug abuse response team in response to the opioid epidemic. As part of that project, NORIS has created a module for use by the DART officers, which has been enhanced to monitor the client's progress while participating in the program. It also has a law enforcement collection component. One other area of note is the enhancements to the police record management system for collection of CIT information. The updates will include disposition and conduct of persons, suicidal tendencies, living arrangements, behaviors, techniques used, injuries to person or officer, charges, history of mental illness and substance abuse. Once implemented, this information will be shared with other law enforcement and criminal justice agencies. Currently, these enhancements are about 60% complete, and all of our police record management users will be able to collect information using the CIT enhancements as well. And then finally, I want to add in the OIBR's use of force enhancements, which Carlton referenced at the beginning of this presentation. The police record management systems will be enhanced to collect the use of force data for all of our agencies. This is just an overview of our databases maintained here at Norris. It really illustrates the high level of multi-agency integration. I do want to note that Norris is a person-based system using the foundation of the regional identifier for that. And then this last slide is just an overview of all of the Norris applications that we maintain. So we have general system applications, jail applications, court applications, and police applications. And that is the end of my presentation. Contact information is provided. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to share information on Lucas County here, and I will turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Holly, and Michael, and Carlton. Bethany, if you could just give me a flash and let me know that I fixed my phone problem. I hope you can all hear me better now than before. Given the presentations that we've seen and the incredible success of them, I think one of the first questions, which is appropriate and important, is for other jurisdictions interested in establishing a CJCC in their state, what would you recommend as a first step? And that recognizes that, as Holly said, that their CJCC is essentially codified. But are there suggestions for those jurisdictions who see a value in that kind of local criminal justice planning as how they could get something like that started?
Chris, I'll jump in and take a stab at least at first. I think it's really important that you have someone who is a champion for pulling this committee together, who has the sort of oomph behind them, and that could be that they are just that well respected as an elected official. It could be that they're a county commissioner, and so at the end of the day, they ultimately at least have some control over the purse strings. But to have someone who is a champion who can make the initial invitations and say, let's come to the table. A lot of times people are leery because they think, okay, you're going to judge me for what I'm doing. You're going to tell me I'm not doing a good job. I'm going to lose resources. But to be able to make it sort of a safe space for people to come and talk about the issues, start with the low-hanging fruit. If you don't have a CJCC already, then there's definitely low-hanging fruit out there. And the joke around here always is get a commissioner to sponsor it and make sure that you serve lunch. And those two things get generally will, sort of at least put some people in the room to get the conversation started. But I do think that you have to have someone who has a passion for this and who has the ability to pick up the phone and have his or her call answered by the other elected and appointed officials that you need to have at the table.
And Michael, I would add, I belong to a network called the National Network of Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils, and I have learned that there are many different shapes and forms of CJCCs, and oftentimes it may be an office of just one person. So I think the key is really taking a look at the composition of your community and how you think you can get this started. And like Michael said, is there a champion that can help you out in this process? And I would encourage everyone to go to the Justice Management Institute, JMI. They have a few resources for establishing CJCCs in your community.
And I would imagine that included in that is also ensuring that from the very beginning, you've thought kind of long and hard about who the stakeholders are and ensure that you really do include everyone who should be included needs to be included so that you don't have active opposition from folks who may feel like they should be involved but haven't been simply because you're new at this. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. It's always a fine line between for the right mix on your council and what works in your community, and you want to be inclusive enough that you have voices heard, but you do not want to end up with a council that's 64 people either. So it's really, it's a balancing act of the right composition of the council.
So we have a question from a woman who's a veteran and very interested in veterans issues, as you can imagine. And so the question is, do you have the VA board with your Stepping Up program and connecting with issues around veterans courts, veterans pods, et cetera, and diagnosis of incarcerated individuals?
Absolutely. Here in Franklin County, we do. Our local VA is critical to this involvement. We have a couple of individuals who are assigned as the VJOs, the justice officers for the local Veterans Administration, and they are included on all of the email lists. They are included in all of the meetings, and one of the things that we do at the time of booking now, when we take information for folks when they come in, is we ask, have you ever served in the United States military? And if the answer to that is yes, we immediately make a call or a connection to the Veterans Administration so that we can get those folks connected to the resources that they've earned by serving the country. And often there are more resources available to them, or different funding sources that are available to them than might be available if they weren't a veteran. So yes, it's absolutely critical for us. And in fact, just before I was called into this conference call, our most frequent user of the jail in Franklin County is in fact a veteran. And we got a call this morning and found out that he was back in jail, and that call came from the Veterans Administration. So that we could immediately reach out and try to make a reconnection. So it's just that important on a daily basis for us.
And we also have connections to our local VOA. As with Franklin County, we have a focus on reentry, and our reentry coordinator works very closely with our Veterans Affairs office. He also does some volunteer work for them. One thing that we are exploring, we do have a veterans flag in our records management system for the jail and for law enforcement and courts. However, we do not have a direct feed from Veterans Affairs yet, so we're exploring the opportunity to maybe make that happen. And Toledo Municipal Court does have a dedicated veterans docket.
Another person raised a question, can your population apply for benefits before release? And if so, how are you processing the forms for those?
Holly, you want to go first on this from Lucas, and then I'll pick it up from Franklin?
Yes, definitely. So this discussion is actually in limbo here in Lucas County. Up until recently, we had case managers assigned to the jail, and we also had a JFS worker assigned to the jail, making sure that individuals are enrolled for benefits prior to release. With some of the restructuring we have done, the process is changing. There's still connection to enrollment. It's just not as seamless as it was. So one of the first projects and tasks for the new Behavioral Health Criminal Justice Coordinator is to look at the current system, look at what was working, and with the changes, what is no longer working, and resolving that issue in the very near future.
And in Franklin County, the answer is unfortunately no. We're not doing that inside the jail, primarily because the facilities that we have are both pretty old, and finding the space and it's the logistics of trying to figure out how to connect. We're booking 200 people a day into the facility. More than half of them leave within 72 hours. And so trying to figure out the logistics of that. We are in the process of, we've just broken ground on a new correctional facility that will open in 2019, and this was actually taken into account then, so that the answer then will be yes. Everyone at the time of booking will be asked if they are connected. We'll verify their connectivity, and if they're not connected, there'll be a job and family services person or people at the jail to do that. Currently, we're not doing it at the jail, but as I said, we do have folks embedded in the probation department who are making that connection at first meeting with probation officer for those who are on probation. And our job and family services has a dedicated reentry unit who are very familiar with the specialized needs of justice-involved folks. And so our office and the reentry coordinator are constantly connecting folks with those job and family services people. So it's getting to where we want it to be, but it is not as coordinated and seamless as we would like for it to be.
Here's a question, I guess, for Carlton. Given the responsibility that the SAA has for statewide criminal justice planning, which is now legislatively mandated, your criminal justice funding plan that has to be established, particularly for your burn JAG money. How does that work? How does that interaction work with the CJCCs, and how important is that interaction and communication between the SAA and the CJCCs so that you can appropriately ensure that the work that they are doing gets included in that 5-year program or in that strategic plan?
Chris, I'm sure you can imagine if you're trying to put together a comprehensive strategic plan, that coordination and communication with the CJCCs would be very important to that, especially if you hear the efforts. Anyone who sat through this webinar today, you see some exciting things going on in both of these jurisdictions. Now, certainly when we had developed our initial strategic plan, we went through a long process of surveys, interviews with people we called kind of high users of our criminal justice system, and certainly the CJCCs would play an important role in that. But in order to develop a comprehensive strategic plan, I think it's important that we continue to do the work that we're doing right now, which is trying to coordinate our efforts with the CJCC, make sure that their strategic plan is in alignment with what we're trying to accomplish, and then as we have to submit our strategic plan to BJA and then update it, make sure that we continue to work with them to ensure that their efforts are included in what we're submitting to the Department of Justice.
Michael, you shared some information about average length of stay for jail inmates with no mental health issues and those without. How do they identify those people with mental health issues and figure out and track the difference there? And do they include and track that in their jail records management system?
So the original way, Chris, that those numbers were determined was when the Council of State Governments came in and took a look at doing some data analysis for us, and they cross-referenced the jail data with data from the local mental health and addiction board, and picked out people who were known to the mental health and addiction board as having severe and persistent mental illness, and then went back and cross-referenced how long those lengths of stays were. That's the way we got the initial baseline numbers. The way we will be, we've implemented a new jail management system that goes live first of the year. It's been being tested for the last few months. It does indeed have a flag in it that is set whether or not the person screens positive on the brief jail mental health screen, and subsequent screenings. So we will be able then to track folks who have that flag set. It will not necessarily, it won't be necessarily an absolute diagnosis that gets us away from HIPAA a little bit, but it will be anyone who scores up at a particular level on one of the screening tools, and then we will be able to track those folks separate from people who don't score equally as high, as well as continuing to try to work through the Data-Driven Justice Initiative, figuring out how to work within the HIPAA rules so that we can compare our jail data and our local mental health board data and continue to track long-term in the same way as we obtained our benchmark numbers.
Thank you. What is either Holly or Michael, do you have any experience with assisted outpatient treatment courts?
We do not in Franklin County. To my knowledge, we do not have one set up, although Justice Eve Stratton has convened multiple meetings to talk about them. We currently are not using them in Franklin County. And but Holly, up in Lucas, what are you guys doing?
We do not have one either.
One question, Senator, what do you think about the Edwins model in Cleveland? Are there any models of helping ex-offenders move into manufacturing careers in Ohio?
Actually, our representatives from our local reentry coalition made a field trip visit to Edwins about 2 years ago, looking at the Restaurant Training Institute, and obviously we're very impressed. We haven't been able to replicate such a model here in Lucas County. However, there has been discussions with one of our new job training facilities to incorporate a training program of some sorts for baking bread in the facility. I'm not sure where that has gone at this point. As for manufacturing, the actual Goodwill Industries here in Lucas County received a Second Chance Act grant focusing on manufacturing training in Lucas County. If this person sends me an email, I would be happy to connect them with the project coordinators to discuss the results that they've had. I know they've had some pretty good success with this population and our local trade unions.
We similarly have worked with Goodwill Industries to do the same sort of thing. There's an organization here locally called TAP that does take our folks who are returning from incarceration and connect them to manufacturing and logistics jobs. And we'd be happy to equally share that information in terms of work that's being done, what we can do to connect inmates inside the jail. Again, with the age of our facilities, that's not worked out very well. We are working with some of our kitchen staff to make sure that they have SaniServe certifications when they come out, and have made connections to a couple of local fast food restaurant chains who are interested in being able to hire folks with that type of certification. But I wouldn't say that we've actually got any sort of programming inside the jail in place that's really all that well established, and certainly nothing that we could point to and show you what the track record of performance would be just yet.
Does the state provide any administrative support for any of the local CJCCs?
Hey, this is Carlton. Yes, we have. We provided funding to both Franklin County and to Lucas County in the past, and probably even beyond that is when they administer, when they do the recommendations for us, we actually put together a budget so they're able to see the funding that's available that they have at their kind of disposal to figure out how they want to commit those dollars in their particular jurisdiction. Now, we've done that more in the past. Lately, we've kind of gotten away from just giving them a dollar amount, and what we really ask them to do is just kind of rank their programs and provide them to us. I want to get back to kind of the thing that you're talking about before, though, Chris, because I think it raises a really important issue around collateral sanctions. We funded a program a few years ago that was focused on providing mechanics training to people who had been incarcerated in the past, and it was incredibly successful in terms of their job placement. I think it was around 90% in terms of job placement. I don't remember the recidivism numbers because it was a few years ago. But, one of the issues that I think I know it's not really the focus of our discussion today, but I think one of the issues that we have to really think about in trying to deal with returning folks who are returning back and our desire to make sure that they don't reoffend and find themselves in prison again is to really focus on the issue of collateral sanctions and the things that people, after they've served their sentence, that they are prohibited from doing. Certainly, I think we all understand that there's a certain amount of germaneness between the offense that a person might have committed and things that they're precluded from doing in the future. But from time to time, I think we've seen that bleed over to where there's no real relationship to why a person is not able to pursue some type of employment opportunity or being eligible for financial aid and things like that, that really kind of cut against our efforts to try to keep people from ending up back in prison and being able to become a productive member of society. So I know that wasn't really the focus of our discussion today, but when we start talking about jobs and job placement and things that we can do, I think it's important to always raise the issue of collateral sanctions and making sure that we're not, in the name of safety, keeping people from being able to earn a living.
Along those lines, just heard a great presentation by the governor of Kentucky recently about along those lines about how they looked into all of their licensure sanctions and just cleaned house and just changed so many of the issues that were affecting people's ability to get simple licenses for things like cutting hair and such, and that were so preventative from people from getting jobs that really weren't relevant to whatever particular offense they had committed. So I agree with you 100%, Carlton. Let me ask this: Are there any thoughts on criminal justice system considering collaborating with state and mental health to buy beds for patients with dual concerns, mental health, and history of criminal offenses?
I don't know if we're necessarily collaborating with state mental health, but we're in constant coordination and collaboration with the local Mental Health and Recovery Services Board on how to best serve individuals with behavioral health that also have contacts with the criminal justice system. We're just working through this process. One of our obstacles, and this was something that was highlighted at the Homelessness Summit last week, is that our local housing authority has some pretty strict limitations on housing requirements that precludes the reentry population from obtaining housing in LMHA units. And so it's something we're working on more with our local board than the state mental health agency.
Okay, not seeing any more questions coming up. We'll have one last question, but before that, I'm going to ask you to take a short evaluation, which is really important for us so that we can get better at these things. So we'll just do that real quickly, and I'm going to turn it over to Bethany for that, and then we'll get back to one more question.
Sorry, Chris, having a little bit of technical difficulties with the poll. We'll open it as soon as we can.
Okay, then here's what we're going to do. While Bethany fixes her technical issue, I'm going to go back, since I understand that there were some problems hearing me originally. I just want to go over a couple of things and let you folks know that we're recording today's session for future playback. that the recording and the slides from this session will be posted on the NCJA website and emailed to everyone who registered for the session. And hopefully that if you've had any technical issues yourselves, that you've been able to listen in on your phone, if not on the webinar itself. So again, we just wanted you to know that it will be posted and it will be sent to you. So let me kind of go back to this question. For those the CJCs for the CJCCs that have presented today, or if you know of other ones out there, are there principles with voting rights? Does the SAC or the SAA have voting rights? Does the CJCC go through a formal voting process related to utilization of burn and victims funds? So can you, so if Michael and Holly could kind of answer from their perspective, and maybe you have some examples elsewhere also.
So here in Franklin County, so Carlton does not have a voting position on the CJCC. My department is staffed to that board, so we go through and make all of the initial recommendations, and we analyze the proposals and come back with what we believe are the appropriate recommendations for funding. We then take those to the Criminal Justice Planning Board for approval, and we actually do get voting approval from the members on that recommendation to say, yep, this is what staff recommends. We as a board sign off on that. It's good to go. Go ahead and submit it to Carlton. And I'm happy to, if anyone would like to shoot me an email message, I'm happy to provide the bylaws for our Criminal Justice Planning Board so that you can see what the membership, the requirements are, and also what all of the voting requirements and details and all that sort of thing are as well.
And like Franklin County, Carlton does not have a seat at the CJCC. However, we have a slightly different process. As I mentioned in my presentation, we have an allocation review committee that actually makes funding recommendations to the CJCC. The committee is comprised of about 23 representatives of the criminal justice community, from nonprofits to victim services to courts, law enforcement, corrections. They develop an allocation plan with staff input based on staff review, and sometimes we also do interviews of prospective grant applicants as well. Those recommendations then are voted on by our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and once that is approved, the recommendations then go to OCJS.
And then, Chris, once we get the recommendations, we actually review them. We have an internal compliance piece, so we're looking at kind of performance history, grant history. There's some information that the CJCCs may not have about a particular subgrantee. We're also mindful of other grants that they might have at the time. So we look at that and look at their past performance and things like that. And then we have internal folks, subject matter experts, who will take a look at it. And then collectively we come together, myself and our senior staff, to review those. And certainly as we look at each individual grant, we also are mindful of the process that the CJCCs, we just call them RPUs, but that the RPU has gone through, and we try to be very respectful of the process that they've gone through since they're doing this on our behalf, and we want them to continue to do that. And so from time to time, we may have questions about a particular grant that they've recommended for funding, and they've always been very good about sharing information with us back and forth. So I think it's a very good process, and I wish more communities across our state would make the same decision to create something like we have here in Lucas and in Franklin County.
Well, thank you, folks. I want to thank Carlton and Michael and Holly for sharing their experience and their programs with us. My guess is that everybody who's been a participant today is more than a little bit impressed with the kind of work that the CJCCs are doing and the coordination with the SAA, which is essential to all of that. We're not going to make you do the evaluation right now. We're going to send it out to you via email because of our technical difficulties on our end. But we would really ask you to take a look at that and send it back to us. We'll also be sending the webcast and the slides to all the attendees tomorrow and posting them on the website, as I said. So again, thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you for the participation, and everybody have a great afternoon. And we're finished.